Hey everyone, Rare here. Time for another Patreon-sponsored blind reaction. And this one comes to you courtesy of Dark Griffin, who has requested that I react to Rising of the Shield Hero cut content, What Did the Anime Change? Episodes 1 and 2 by AniNews. So, yeah, sounds pretty self-explanatory. We're going to be looking at what was cut/changed from the first two episodes of Shield Hero. And it's from AniNews, who I've seen quite a few videos from now, though everything else before this has been Overlord-related, I'm pretty sure. And now we're looking at a different isekai, Shield Hero. But, yeah, should be good. I think I've heard a little bit about what was changed, but probably not everything. And it'll just be good to have it all laid out all at once. And this way I'll be able to properly take it in. But people in the comments do tend to keep me at least a little bit informed. So yeah. Anyway, let's go ahead and get this started. Here we go.
So, it looks like this season is going to be focused on
my
the
anime
Rising
list?
of the Shield Hero. Unfortunately, it's still too early to do any who is or how strong are videos for it. But I can
he does
talk
fate
about
videos,
a lot
too.
of the glossed
That's
over
cool.
mechanics and more hero-related details. So, let's kick off a new cut content series. And this time, thanks to the help of Salazar84, we'll be able to share with you the differences between not only the manga and the anime, but also the light novel.
Cool.
But before we get into it, I'm super excited to launch a new Overlord design.
Well, that's
It's
nice.
not quite relevant, but I figured I'd just point it out, given that a lot of you probably come from my Overlord videos anyway. So,
I mean,
this
technically I
is
do.
a 6 stars design, done by the very talented Bakuretsu, who also sells designs of his own, like this Asylum Voice one. So if you're interested in mine or his, then both our links are in the description below. But now, let's get started. Episode 1, covering chapters 1 to 9 of the light novel and chapters 1 and 2 of the manga. Before Naofumi is isekai'd. Isekai'd? You know what I mean. Before he is transported to this new world, he's in the library and picks up what seemed to be just a regular fantasy novel, one called The Records of the Four Holy Weapons. Now, instead of just hitting a blank page and getting sucked into the book, he sits down and really gets into it for a bit. But it turned out to be a rather generic and boring story about how these swords, spear, bow, and shield would just travel around and gather strength. He actually almost fell asleep because there was no heroine-type character in this story. There was this one female,
relatable.
a princess, that he didn't really like because she was constantly manipulating people and obsessed over the heroes. She would jump from hero to hero, but would never settle on a single one, which kind of triggered Naofumi. Now, you'd think that after reading this he'd be at least a little bit wary of any overzealous female people that he came across in the New World. But I guess when you're told to save the world and no one wants to help you with it, you'll be happy with just about anybody. Anyway, he reads on about these individual heroes. The sword hero is said to be extremely strong. The spear hero tends to value and protect his friends, and the bow hero would never tolerate injustice. He was surprised that every hero was a good person with great personalities, something that's usually attributed to a single protagonist. But what about the shield hero? He gets to it, and well, you know, isekaification occurs, and Naofumi is ecstatic to be in the New World. They proceed to talk to the king about the onslaught of waves, and it's during this that we get Naofumi's initial thoughts on his companion heroes. He thinks of Ren as some short, handsome guy, who would likely be mistaken for a girl if he cross-dressed. Motoyasu seemed very lighthearted.
Yeah, I guess you could pull that off.
Brother, but also someone who probably has 2 girlfriends. Then Itsuki was more soft-spoken and mysterious, like the type to have some special hidden strength. The heroes are then told to check their stats, and in the novel, it's Itsuki instead of Naofumi that inquires on how to do so. We do briefly see Naofumi's stats in the anime, though in the manga, it's slightly more digestible, as you see on a visual level how his stats are distributed, rather than the backwards numbers that we see here. If we take both sets of information and then combine them together, you can see that it likely matches to 1 attack, 35 defense, 9 agility, 22 health, and 10 of 1 unknown stat. At least that's how I assume the chart is being distributed. So, more discussion about the heroes in the world to carry on. And it's sometime during that Naofumi suggests that they all form a party and level up together. But as we know, that's not possible due to the warnings of the legends. Naofumi's UI even gives a flashing alert, and its exact words were, "Attention, the legendary weapons and their owners will experience adverse effects if they fight together. Caution, it is preferable that the heroes remain separated when possible." So it's not like it's not possible that they can't fight together. It's just that they shouldn't. Regardless, whatever these adverse effects may be, they seem to be foreshadowing something a bit more ominous than what they're letting off. Now we can skip to where they're figuring out that they're all from parallel Japans. This conversation leads to the origins of the other three heroes. Basically, it's how they remember being transported to the new world, something that the anime skips. For Ren, he died. Well, more specifically, he was murdered. At 16 years old, he was just a high school student walking home with his friend when they were attacked. The last thing he remembers was saving his friend and watching
Yeah, definitely don't remember that from the anime.
Then he wakes up in Melmarmark. We assume that the cause of death was him being stabbed, because he was noted to be rubbing his side after fending off the attacker. As for Motoyasu, yeah, he also died. In a much less heroic way too, but he was stabbed as well. You see, Motoyasu was a 21-year-old university student with more than one girlfriend, one of which he ended up getting into a heated argument with, where the end result was him getting stabbed.
Kinda right about that.
The funny thing about this is, before Motoyasu even said how he died, Ren actually guessed this exact scenario, and all Motoyasu could do was just shamefully nod his head. It's because of this event that Motoyasu tends to fear violent women, aka yanderes. Finally, we have Itsuki,
who doesn't fear yanderes.
Also died. At 17 years of age,
okay, so
from prep school,
Nafumi's the only one who
woke up here. That's it. So to Nafumi, after hearing all of this, kind of felt even more like an outlier than he already was. After all, he didn't die to get here, just sucked into a book, and that made the others treat him coldly.
Interesting.
So he switched the subject, and they talked more about the system of the world. Here they go deeper into the role of the shield class, at least with respect to what they knew from the games in their own world. The general consensus was that the shielder's main role was to simply protect others from attacks. At first, they began with high defense, but at higher levels, the damage they began to receive didn't balance out with respect to their defenses. It was something that the developers never bothered to fix, and they even considered removing the class completely because it was simply just a dead class. No one would play it, and if you did, you couldn't switch off of it, so it just wasn't any fun. So that's just a little more background on the other three heroes and their already existing perspectives on the shield hero. Obviously, it was never quite great to begin with, almost as if they pitied him, but they didn't quite hate him. Well, not yet anyway. Let's skip the whole partying up part now, and go to where Mine and Naofumi are in the weapon shop. Naofumi gets a free chainmail, and they then go to fight some mobs and grind XP. It's noted that it takes a whole 5 minutes to kill a single orange balloon and gain 1 XP, the remains of which can then be used to either go towards progress for a new shield, or sold for 1 bronze coin. Everything after that up until they're having dinner is pretty spot on. At dinner, Naofumi goes a bit more into why he doesn't drink, explaining that he developed this taste for it after seeing all his friends get drunk while he couldn't, simply due to a high tolerance for it. Yeah, he was a heavyweight that couldn't get drunk easily, so he decided to stop drinking. I mean, it seems reasonable, especially for someone who's trying to save money. After they go to bed, in the light novel, while he's sleeping, he hears someone fighting outside of his room, then someone pulling his clothes, followed by a faint statement from a stranger saying, "Men are such fools, so easily tricked." Of course, he just thought he was dreaming. But I think the manga sums up pretty well what was happening, cause this page here ends chapter 1 on a pretty solid cliffhanger. The next day comes, and Naofumi is dragged before the king. At first, seeing Mine cry and be in distress, he actually felt really bad for her and was genuinely concerned. That was up until she decided to mock him, which is when he realized that it was all a scheme. Naofumi then gets banished and he has to go solo. His first thoughts are to farm some mobs and level up. But remember, it takes him 5 minutes every time to kill a single balloon. Eventually, he meets conditions for both the orange shield and the yellow shield, ones that are gained from absorbing the balloons he's been farming. Then he picked some grasses and found some herbs, which met the conditions for the life shield. Each of these granted equip bonuses, which are all detailed in the weapons book. His existing small shield increases defense by 3. The orange and yellow shield both increase that same stat by 2. And the leaf shield boosts his gathering skill by 1, as well as increases the quality of all the herbs he collects. And that remains as a passive skill no matter what shield he has equipped. We also got a bit of information on how the shield and its abilities work. Basically, Naofumi puts his hand on the shield and thinks of the name of the type that he wants to use. Shield abilities, on the other hand, are unlocked after the user wears a type of shield for a certain amount of time. After unlocking them, they can still be used even if he changes to a different type of shield. Then the equip bonuses are as you'd expect, bonus stats that are granted when having a type of shield equipped. And that's a general summary of the important mechanics related to these weapons. Shifting back to the story now, in the light novel, Naofumi had been grinding balloons for about 2 weeks now. He managed to gain about 40 silvers, but couldn't quite level up quick by only killing orange balloons. So he goes deeper into the forest, eventually stumbling across a red balloon. He spends about 30 minutes fighting this thing, but just can't beat it. He decides to go back to where he normally farms, gets to level 4, then goes and tries again. But once again, he just couldn't kill it. This part in particular just goes to show how difficult it was for Naofumi to level up even a little bit, as well as how hard it is for him to take on even marginally stronger enemies. Now let's skip to when Naofumi first...
That's interesting, but I can kind of understand why they cut it.
The strange man's reasoning for confronting him was to attempt to enslave him. You see, quite a few people would have paid big money to have a hero like him as a slave, so that's exactly what the slave trader set out to do. But after speaking with Naofumi
interesting,
he ultimately decided against it. They start to discuss the differences between the demi-humans and the Therianthropes, aka the Beastmen, and the slave trader leads him to an area where he's offered a choice of 3 cheap slaves. First, a level 5 rabbit man for 25 silver, but it has a genetic disorder that gives it a deformed arm. The second was a level 8 mixed breed lizard man that cost 40 silver. And finally, a level 1 raccoon girl that has panic attacks and coughs a lot. But
made the right choice.
The reason she was so cheap was because raccoon types simply aren't popular. Fox hybrids were known to be the much more valuable pick in that market. Regardless,
I mean, who doesn't like fox girls?
The lizard man.
But
technically, he was the best option. But after seeing Raphtalia's eyes, he changed his mind, and not for the reason that you're thinking either. It wasn't quite out of the good of his heart. No, when he looked into her eyes, he immediately thought of mine. You see, this whole time that Naofumi had been by himself, he had felt that everyone who looked at him thought of him the same way that mine did. Because of this, he couldn't trust anyone. He was just unable to, and this really made him angry. So when he saw this young girl's eyes, that anger rose again, and he immediately wanted to control her, make her his slave in hopes that it would make him feel better. As if controlling this young girl, perhaps even letting her die, would be revenge at mine for all the things that she did, because he could just imagine that it was her. Now, just to clarify, her being a slave to make himself feel better does not mean that he wanted to abuse her in a sexual way. No, not that it makes it better, but he just wanted to see someone else suffer the same way that he did. Anyway, he purchases Raphtalia and makes a blood pact. This involves him using a knife to draw some of his own blood, which you'd think wouldn't be allowed due to the shield's weapon violation rule. But there's actually an exception. When he's not in combat, he's allowed to use knives and other tools as utilities. It's just another random mechanic related to the legendary weapons. So Raphtalia is now Naofumi's slave, which brings us partway into episode 2. This covering chapters 9 to 16 of the light novel and 3 to 4 of the manga. They go to the weapon shop, get some free clothes from the owner, then head out to farm some balloons. In the manga, we see several different types, some egg-looking ones, some tomatoes, then the mushroom ones that we saw in the anime. This unlocked different variants of the mush shield. The base one grants the ability to appraise plants. The blue has an equip bonus of a simple compounding recipe skill, and the green grants apprentice compounding. Basically, these improved his ability to combine ingredients and create medicines. But the way it worked is more like Breath of the Wild's cooking system. In order to make something useful, you first have to experiment with various ingredients, otherwise you just end up with useless mush. The medicine he created for Raphtalia was the results of these experiments. Then he also gains the red small shield, which boosts defense, an egg shield that grants a cooking skill, alongside 2 variants that further improve that, as well as the fishing shield. By this time, Naofumi was level 8 and Raphtalia was level 7. At night, when Raphtalia is having her dreams, in the manga, they show a more graphic version of her nightmare. So I thought I'd share a more detailed version of what she's been seeing every night. It's also worth knowing that after Raphtalia was saved by her parents, she was actually able to return to her village. By the time she walked from the shore she washed up on, back to her ruined village, the knights had already taken care of the monsters. But unfortunately, everyone was already dead. She then dedicated herself to restoring her village, but while trying to do that, she was captured and forced to become a slave. Let's now skip to when Naofumi gives Raphtalia the ball. In the light novel, he allows her to play with it outside the inn that they were staying at. But while she's happily playing, a group of kids approach her and demand she hand it over. After all, she was just a demi-human, and they mocked her for it. Naofumi sees this and confronts the kids, asking why they want something that's not theirs. They basically tell him to screw off, which he then responds by telling them that he has a different ball that they could play with. Raphtalia knows he's referring to the balloons, so she tells the kids to run, but of course they just ignore her. So Naofumi uses one of the balloons to bite the kids, then they all run off. If there's anything to take away from this cut part, it would be Raphtalia's capacity for compassion.
I guess
You'd
they
think that after
cut that for
many years
child
of
cruelty.
and most likely discrimination, she'd be a bit more cold towards people. But
sounds like a pretty
she
good
did
scene.
still attempt to warn them instead of just idly watch them get attacked. Something I'm sure she wouldn't have minded seeing. After this, Naofumi decides to tidy up Raphtalia a bit and
Kind of
get her
establishes
healed.
Raphtalia's
He collects the
character a
remains
bit.
of it, and just on accident, lets the shield absorb it. Now, he didn't fully unlock the new shield, and he didn't want to just cut off all her hair to find out what it could be. So he leaves it locked for the time being, and spends the rest of the time compounding more recipes together and letting the shield absorb them. From doing this, he unlocks 3 shields. The first is the calorie shield, and that increases stamina. The second is the energy shield, which increases SP. SP being kind of like this mana point system, but instead it's unique to the heroes and is only needed when activating weapon skills. And the third was the potential energy shield, which reduces stamina decay. Now, these various systems of magic and mechanics in this world are a bit more complex than I'm currently saying, but I'm sure I'll get deeper into it in another video. Moving on, after killing 2 rabbits that attacked them, Naofumi gains the Usa leather shield and the Usa meat shield. Those improve agility and his ability to dissect things respectively. It was also from this first bloody encounter that Raphtalia changed. She would resolve herself to fight the monsters that she feared so much because anything was better than going back to the slave cage. Thus why she was so adamant on not being abandoned by Naofumi. This fight with the rabbits also ended up splitting Raphtalia's sword, so they needed to go buy a new one. While at the weapon store, the shop owner gives him a whetstone to help maintain future swords. The shield reacts to this item and absorbs it, unlocking him the sharpening shield, with an equip bonus of ore appraisal and a new attribute known as an equip effect. These are unique actives that can only occur when the weapon is equipped. In this case, it was an effect called automatic sharpening, and every time he used it, it would cost a little bit of SP, which also had the adverse effect of making him feel heavier. Finally, we get to the last bit of episode 2, which brings us to their little cave adventure. The anime follows this quite faithfully, so let's just take a look at the shields that he gained. Before entering the cave, he absorbed both a pickaxe and a rope, unlocking him the pickaxe shield, which boosts his mining skill, and then the rope shield. This is the one that had an equip bonus of that airstrike shield skill that we always see him using. It also has an equip effect of gaining rope as a utility. The shield is pretty good for the skill, but when it comes to defense, it's not quite useful unless you actually need rope for something. As
Yeah,
for how the casting of
shield
the
made
skill
of rope.
airstrike shield works, he
Doesn't
must first
sound
shout
that.
the skill's name or do a certain motion to activate it. Then an icon will appear in front of him, marking the area of effect that the skill will hit. It's kind of like the smart cast system in League of Legends. Anyway, they get attacked by the 2-headed dog, defeat it, and now Fumi unlocks the 2-headed black dog shield and a light metal shield. The dog shield has the dog bite equip effect, and the light metal shield increases defenses to magic. And that pretty much brings us to the end of episode 2. Considering that episode 1 was an extended one, I think I'm going to stop here for now. As you can tell, there's plenty of world mechanics and different shields and abilities that I'm sure you wouldn't mind knowing. Of course there's the cutscenes too, so you can expect me to keep covering them in this similar format. Once we get more into the show, I'm sure I can put together a video detailing exactly how all the mechanics work. But for now, we'll just stick with the cut content. Now, before I go, don't forget all merch links are in the description below. So feel free to get any of my Overlord merch or Bakuretsu's A Silent Voice merch from there. But as always, thank you so much for watching, and if you enjoyed this type of anime content, then you already know what to do. So, until next time, ciao!
Well, there we go. That was pretty interesting, and yeah, mainly what I had heard before was the stuff about his reasons for taking Raphtalia, for picking her as his slave, which were a bit more noble than you'd maybe assume. Though I kind of think it's more just because they don't want to put too much internal dialogue in the show, because that can be like overdone pretty easily, and I think in fact the show like basically barely uses that. So instead of telling you what he's thinking, it just sort of lets you kind of take it however you want. Because it doesn't tell you that he pities her either, so it just lets you kind of assume what he's thinking as he looks at her. And I mean, I guess most people will assume it's more of a positive thing than the manga went with, but yeah, I don't know. Either way, what happens in this story is pretty great. So, yeah, that's what matters. But yeah, I hadn't heard a lot about this other stuff, though. A lot of what seems to be in cut is explaining the new shields, most of which aren't really that relevant unless you're really interested in all the gameplay mechanics of this world, which sounds like a weird thing to say, but I mean, that's kind of how it's set up. And of course, like stuff like really focused on him building his level. A bit of that seems to be cut. Just trying to fight enemies that are too strong for him. Although there was that scene with Raphtalia and the kids that was cut that sounded pretty interesting. And also the explanation of how the heroes died, which I didn't know that was the case. I mean, I kind of just thought that, like, I remember them explaining that the world reminded them of like games they had played, so I just kind of expected that maybe they were pulled into a video game instead of a book. But no, apparently all three of them died, so that's crazy. That would have been worth knowing. Though, I don't know, I guess it's not especially relevant. But yeah, interesting stuff. Definitely a cool video to watch. And it's kind of interesting just going back to the early episodes of Shield Hero from where I am now. I mean, a lot has happened. It's kind of crazy. But yeah, good stuff. Hope you enjoyed the reaction. Let me know if you did, and see you in the next one.